Hello, Coach Vusi here. We are discussing Eco 10B Study Unit 1. I'm just going to try and be very quick. I'm going to cut corners a lot, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a beautiful background into the module. The reason why I'm doing this session for free is, guys, to try and give everyone a good foundation. You cannot build a mansion on top of a shaky foundation. You will be surprised why is it difficult for you to understand a lot of things as you move along the module, just because you missed the foundation. So I'm giving you that foundation today. So Eco 10B first study unit, we are discussing the 5 macroeconomic objectives in the economy. First of all, you need to catch the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. The difference is that microeconomics studies the individual units of the economy. It studies my decisions, going to the shop, going to Pick n Pay. It studies the decisions of Pick n Pay. It studies the price of bread. While macroeconomic, it studies economy as a whole at an aggregate level. So everything will be spoken in terms of not the price of bread, for example, but the price, the general price levels in the economy, or inflation, for example. So we are talking aggregates, kole, or the sum of things, how much goods and services were produced in the country and what is their monetary value. So number one, the 5 macroeconomic objectives. And then another thing that you need to be very, very, very aware of, the whole study of this module, it revolves around these 5 macroeconomic objectives. In case you didn't know, if somebody hasn't explained this to you, you might go through the module not noticing that you are still revolving around the same thing. So these objectives, guys, they form the whole module. Everything else we are going to study is going to be dealing with each of these ones, or the collective of these ones. So number one, you have economic growth, you have full employment, you have economic growth, you have full employment, you have price stability or low inflation, you have the balance of payments or external stability, and then we have equitable distribution of income. So they are 5. Now, we are not really going to discuss much as to what is economic growth per se, but we're just going to, you will see as we move along. Let's start with the first one, economic growth. Economic growth refers to the total value of economic growth obviously refers to how has the economy performed. It's the measurement of the economy. How has the economy performed from one year to another? Why is this an objective? And by the way, why are we calling them objectives? Objectives are plans. Objectives are things we want to achieve. Objectives are goals. So these are the goals of the economy. These are the goals of the government with regard to the economy. We want to see all these things being achieved, 5 of them in the economy. Hence, they are called objectives. So, objective number 1, goal number 1 is the economic growth. Why? We want to have a growing economy because it helps to uplift the standards of living of the citizens of a country. And then it is also assumed that a growing economy is able to create jobs for its citizens. Even though it's not always the case, you can have a growing economy that doesn't create jobs for its citizens. It's called jobless growth. How does that happen? It happens when people are replaced with machinery. So economy is growing, economy is performing well, but it's not creating jobs for its citizens. And you also can have a growing economy that does not uplift the standards of living of its citizens. Our economy is also an example of such. You have an economy that is growing, but only few individuals are actually benefiting from the growth of the economy. And the majority are the poor of the poorest, who are not really benefiting from the economic growth. But regardless of that, we still need a growing economy. And another thing that we need to take note of, we need to be aware that economy can grow, but at the same time destroying the environment. You can have a firm coming to open a big factory. It employs people, it creates jobs, economy is growing, but it's causing air pollution. It leaves people sick and all that. So you need to balance all those things. While this is an objective, while we want to achieve a growing economy, we need to keep in mind that, one, we don't want a jobless growth. Two, we need to be aware of the externalities or side effects of a growing economy. So how do we then measure? How do we know whether economy is growing or not? There are many measurements. You have your gross national product, your gross domestic product, but we're going to focus on gross domestic product, the GDP. It's the value of all goods and services produced within the boundaries of a country within a particular period, usually a year. All goods and services, they are measured. It may sound impossible to you, but in actual fact, even though we don't have the exact results for every good and service that is produced in the economy, but the main fact is that the economy, the statistics of the States SA, for example, is able to collect statistics that measure all goods and services that are produced within the boundaries of a country within a particular period. So remember, I talk about the boundaries of a country. That's a GDP. And then the gross national product, or let me say the gross national product can be the same as gross national income. That one refers to citizens of a country. Let's say gross national income, for example. All income received by the citizens of a country, whether they earned it from the US or from Botswana or from Namibia, it doesn't matter as long as it's the income of the citizens. And then you have other incomes that are earned within the boundaries of a country, which are earned by foreign people. That income, they take it home to their countries. So it's separated from the national product or national income. But in any case, let's focus on GDP. There are many ways of measuring gross domestic product. Sometimes it's measured at market prices. Sometimes it's measured at basic prices. Sometimes it's measured at factor cost. I'm not going to dwell much on that one. I'm going to share some notes with you, by the way. I'm more interested in the GDP. By the way, GDP excludes intermediate goods, or goods that are still not finished in the production process, or goods that are considered to be intermediate. For example, the flour that is found in a bakery is not a final product. It's an intermediate product. When we calculate the GDP, we exclude it because they are not using that flour like me in my home. They are using it to produce bread, for example. So the ultimate use of a good, it determines whether it is a final product or an intermediate product. Keep that one in mind. So you have GDP you have nominal GDP, very, very important. There are things that I'm going to be highlighting like this one. You have nominal GDP, you have real GDP. Okay? Actually, before I go there, as we are talking about economic growth, something comes to mind. There's something they call per capita GDP. So you have GDP and you have per capita GDP, and then you have per capita GDP. Per capita GDP. The only difference between GDP and per capita GDP. Let me bring this a bit closer. The only difference is that it's GDP divided by population. And then you get per capita GDP. So it's the whole GDP divided by the number of people in a country, and then you get how much GDP each person has in a country, how much share of the total GDP each person has. That one is called per capita GDP. So economic growth is measured in GDP and per capita GDP, either of the two. But let's talk GDP. As we're talking GDP, take note that GDP, there is what we call nominal GDP. Nominal and real GDP. What's the difference? Okay? And then I'm going to show you how to calculate the change in GDP from one year to another. Okay? First of all, let's calculate nominal GDP. We're going to make a simple example. Let's say a country produced one product. Let's say it produced 1,000 bananas times 50 cents. in 2021. Let me cancel this. And then let's say it produced 1,000 bananas at times 60 cents in 2022. Okay? So, if we are calculating, let's say this is the only goods and service that was produced in a country. If we are calculating GDP for 2021, we're only going to say this times the 50 cents. So it's 1,000 rand times 0.50. You are going to get 500 rand. Okay? And then this one again, you are going to say 1,000 times 60. You are going to get 600 rand. So the question is, they will give you this for 2021 and give you this for 2022 and say which GDP is bigger between the 2 years. The clear answer is 2022 is bigger, but you are only talking of nominal GDP. Yes, if you are talking nominal GDP, you are right. And then, now, if we calculate the GDP growth, what are we going to do? Or if we are calculating the real GDP, what are we going to do? We are going to say 2022 GDP measured in terms of the prices of the base year. They will always give you a base year. But our base year here is going to be 2021. Base year is always the previous year, one of the previous years. So you're going to say 1,000 times the prices of the previous year. You're going to get 500. Now, this is now 2022. Can you see that there was no GDP growth? The GDP in 2021 was 500 rand. In 2022, it's also 500 rand. Now, this is the real GDP. So, it's GDP of the current year measured in prices of the previous year or the base year or at constant prices. So you have nominal GDP. Another thing, the nominal GDP is GDP measured at current prices, like this one. At current price. That's nominal GDP. And then the real GDP is GDP measured in at constant prices. Constant prices. Using the same price of the base year, but calculating the current production, like in this case. So, nominal GDP, current prices. Real GDP, constant prices. Okay? So, I've shown you the difference between the real GDP and the nominal GDP. Now, let's calculate the GDP growth, or the growth in GDP. Quickly. You have 2021, we have 10 million worth of GDP. And then you have 2022, you have 15 million worth of GDP. By how much percentage did it grow? It's very simple, guys. So the answer is current minus previous over previous times 100 over 1. Which one is current? 15 million. Which one is previous? 10 million. Over previous, 10 million. Not sure if my zeros are okay. So basically you have 5 million divided by 10 million. So your GDP grew by 50%. They will always give you the current values and the previous values. And this is the formula you need to use. And then you are done. Here you are calculating growth in GDP. Remember, I spoke about measurement. How do we measure? How do we know whether economy is growing or not? Yes, it's growing. it grew by 50% based on the figures that we just decided to use. But you will always be given the figures. And then how do you differentiate between nominal GDP and real GDP? I did show you in the previous page. So, what else? Under the economic growth, some of the things you'll read the notes. You'll also get to see the problems associated with GDP. Meaning, what are the problems of calculating GDP? Number one, for example, we have non-market production. The government is producing goods that are not produced really in the market. For example, the production of health services, education services, they are not really in the market. And then you also have unrecorded activity, like your prostitution, drugs, dealings and stuff, even the bush mechanics and stuff, unrecorded services. And then you have data revision. Data has to be constantly revised based on the latest information. So those are the challenges that makes it complicated to calculate the GDP. And then you have economic welfare. You'll check some of the things in the notes. And then let's see. And then as we measure economic growth, again, as we measure economic growth, we also use the business cycle. This is the growth path of the business cycle. And then the economic activity goes like this. It's not constant. It's not constant. So, as an objective of the economic growth, we're trying to level the field. This wave, we're trying that it can be a bit smooth. We don't want, today the economy is growing very high, next thing the economy is falling, next thing is growing very high, it's unstable. We want a situation like this. We want to level the fluctuations to be at least closer to the growth path. And then the business cycle has a recession at these are recession points, these ones. And then this, we have an upswing. And then these top points, they are called a boom or a peak. And then you have these downwards, it's called a downswing. So these are the 4 points of the business cycle. The bottom one is the recession. The upwards is the upswing. The top one is the boom or peak. The downwards is the downswing. So when you are supposed to be showing this, you will maybe here say A, B, C, D. And then in your information, you'll be saying, at point A, the economy is at recession. Between point A and point B, the economy is at upswing. Between point B and D, which is actually C. Between point B and D, the economy is at a downswing. And then, let me see, did I mention all of them? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, this one I just repeated it. But in any case, it doesn't matter. This is another recession or a through. It's also called a through. Okay, so as we measure the economic growth, we also measure how is the economy going upwards. Is it at a downswing or is it at an upswing? Okay, so we are measuring economic activity. So this one is very close to another objective, the unemployment objective. As the economy grows, usually the economy will create jobs. So can you see that these objectives are not standing alone individually? They interconnect with each other. Okay? So keep that one in mind. And then the sources of economic growth, you have the supply factors and then you have the demand factors. They are easy to understand as you're going to read. And then, now let's talk full employment or low unemployment. This is a very controversial one. When we speak about full employment as an objective, it doesn't mean that we're going to have everyone employed. It's impossible. It's not going to happen in any economy. Why? Because you will have graduates that are looking for a job that just graduated. And you will have people that just left a job looking for another job. So can you see that unemployment will always be there? So it doesn't have to be at zero. But we're trying to have low unemployment. It's a controversial one and very emotional one because the more people are unemployed, the more they don't have income, the more there are riots in the country, the more there is political instability. Hence, this is also a goal or an objective. It's even very close to political attention, because the more the government is sitting there and people don't have jobs, chances of it staying in power are very low. So, you have what is called labor force. What is labor force? It's people that are willing, people of working age, that are willing and able to work. Okay? And then how do we measure unemployment? There is what is called unemployment rate. How do you measure unemployment? Again, here's the formula. Labor force, I'm just going to say LF. Labor force over population. Unemployment. No, I'm wrong. It's the number of unemployed over the labor force. Number of people that are unemployed divided by the number of people of working age who are willing and able to work, times 100. They'll always give you these figures whenever you need to get the rate of unemployment. Okay? And then you have the unemployment or the unemployed. You have two measurements of unemployment. You have two definitions of unemployment. You have the strict definition of unemployment and you have an expanded definition of unemployment. The strict definition, it means a person who falls here must have taken some steps recently to find employment. That's the strict definition. And then the expanded definition, the willingness to find a job is enough, even though you haven't looked for a job recently. Maybe you looked for a job for the past 2 years and then you gave up, and then recently you didn't look for a job. The strict definition says no, you're not part of the unemployed. But the expanded definition says yes, you are unemployed, even though you didn't take steps recently to look for a job. And then also you have types of unemployment. You have your seasonal unemployment. These ones are not in first study unit, but they are part of the same topic, so I'm just going to touch them. You have seasonal unemployment, people that are unemployed because it's not a season for that industry to be operating. For example, the planting and harvesting. There are certain crops that are only planted in winter and maybe harvested in summer. When it's not their period, those people will be unemployed. It's seasonal unemployment. And then you have structural unemployment. Structural unemployment, it's when people are replaced, for example, by machinery, or the mismatch between job qualifications and skills and the requirements of the jobs by employers. You have a degree, but you have an accounting degree, but the more jobs that are available are for teachers. So you are unemployed. So that's a structural unemployment. And then you have frictional unemployment. You are unemployed because you recently graduated, you are looking for a job. Or you left a job and then you are looking for another. That's frictional. And then what else? What's another one? Maybe I forgot another one. I'm trying to be quick. You have cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment. The business cycle. When the economy is on a downswing, you are unemployed because the economic activity is going down, or the economic activity in the country is low. So you are unemployed, or you are unemployed because it's a recession. So that one is a cyclical unemployment. It's related to the business cycle. Okay? And then, like I said, that these objectives they intertwine with each other. The main one, the most corrupt one, is the relationship between unemployment and inflation. There is what is called a trade-off. You will find that one in the current assignment. There's a trade-off between unemployment and inflation. What does it mean? It means in order to fight inflation, you need to understand that you'll have to allow unemployment to grow. Or in order to fight unemployment, you need to understand that you'll need to allow inflation to go up. It's hard to move both of them in the same direction, to fight both of them in the same direction. So the government with its policies has to decide that which one is the pressing one now. Are we fighting unemployment? Then they need to fight it as an objective, but keeping in mind that inflation will grow on the side. But if the price levels are the main objective, which is inflation, they're going to fight inflation, but keeping in mind that unemployment will grow. Okay? So it's called a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. And then you will usually, they say, show it using a graph. You will use what is called a Phillips curve. This is your inflation, price levels. This is your unemployment. Okay? If inflation is at this level, unemployment is at this level, I'm going to say U0, P0. Okay? Basically, the graph is like this, to make it simple. So in order to fight inflation, to bring it down to P1, for example, we need to be aware that unemployment will grow. Remember, numbers start from 0. When you are going that way, you are growing. When you are going that way, you are growing. So there's a trade-off. In order to fight unemployment, to bring it down from U1, for example, to bring it down, you must understand that it will go hand in hand with rising inflation. So this is the Phillips curve. It's in your current assignment, but the one, if I'm correct, the one which is in the current assignment, it's a situation that is called stagflation. You are faced with a situation where unemployment is growing, inflation is also growing at the same time. You don't know which one to fight first. So that one is like this. It's the same Phillips curve. And then, since they are growing both of them are growing, you will have another curve. Meaning, you have, can you see? Both of them are growing. This one is going that way, this one is going that way. So you will have maybe A and B, and then you will show the movement. So I've given you 3 marks there. And then let's see. What policies can we use to reduce unemployment? Remember, I'm trying to give you an understanding. I'm trying to give you a picture of how the economy works. What policies can we use? I'm not going to look at my notes. I'm just trying to share this. One of the policies that we can use is to limit population growth. Because the more population grows, the more we are struggling to find jobs for our people. And yes, by the way, let me connect this one to the GDP growth or the economic growth objective. Economy can be really said to be growing when it's growing at a higher rate than the population. If the economy is growing at 2% and population is growing at 5%, there is no economic growth, because the number of people that are sharing that growth are bigger than the growth. Can you see? Okay? So if the population is growing too faster than the economic growth, then there is no growth. So we can, that's another point when you're dealing with economic growth. You can say for economy to be really said to be growing, it has to grow at a higher rate than the population. So now, one of the weapons we can use to fight unemployment is to limit population growth. Number 2, the government can create jobs through public works programs. Number 3 is to encourage small businesses. Number 4, let me see. Yeah, but I just given you something there. Oh, to promote demand for goods and services. How do you promote demand for goods and services? Through increasing expenditure. The government can put more money into the economy so that it can maybe create industries, create jobs, and then as jobs are being created, employment is created. So those are some of the things you can use to fight unemployment. And then let's talk objective number 3, the price stability or low inflation. This one I'm going to be very short on it. How do we measure inflation? Inflation is the sustained increase in general price levels. If prices increase today, or tomorrow or in the next 2 months, it's not inflation. It has to be sustained. Prices keep on increasing. Prices keep on increasing. Like what is happening currently, especially caused by the oil prices. we're experiencing growth in inflation. So obviously it's an objective, it's a goal for us to achieve, to have low inflation, because the more inflation grows or price levels increase, the more the purchasing power of the money goes down. It can be the same 10 rand that I was having last month, but it can no more buy what it used to buy. So the purchasing power of the rand value, for example, is going down when we are experiencing inflation. One, I've combined inflation and unemployment. Remember, now I'm just going to touch on inflation a little bit. Then how do you calculate inflation? Consumer price index. There is also producer price index. This one measures a basket of goods and services produced in a country. The value of the basket of goods and services produced in a country. In other words, this basket, what they do, they say, okay, an average South African needs a bread in their basket, needs 2 loaves of bread, needs 1 kg of sugar, needs 10 rand worth of electricity, needs health services worth 10 rand, needs education services worth 10 rand, and then they put all those things together, they put their prices, they add. So that's a basket. And then they measure their total value. If their total value is 50 rand, and then next year they measure the same thing, they find that it's now 80 rand, and then how do you then calculate inflation? You will then say the same way as population growth. Current minus previous over previous times 100 equals to a growth in inflation rate. Okay, so usually, now this one measures goods and services. This one measures the value of goods that are in the production process. It excludes services, and it includes intermediate goods that are not yet finished, that cannot be purchased by the final consumer. So this one measures the cost of living, this one measures the cost of production. Okay, cost of living, cost of production. But the main one that you are going to deal with, that you need to master the most, is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. They will not ask you to calculate the Consumer Price Index. They will give you the Consumer Price Index, maybe it's 20% for 2021, and then it's 25% for 2022, and then they say calculate the growth in inflation. Obviously, it's going to be the current minus previous over previous times 100 over 1. So it's going to be 25 minus 20 divided by 20, and then that's it. Exactly the same formula like the economic growth. So the index you will always be given, by the way. And there are two methods of calculating inflation. Two methods of calculating inflation. I might not articulate it properly with words, but what the first method, I think it's in my notes. The first method, you compare the CPI for August 2021 with the CPI Consumer Price Index for August 2022, for example. You compare the inflation for the same month of this year, current year, and the previous year. Okay? If the CPI was 20%, this year is 25%, you will use the formula that I gave you. So this is the first method, but in words, you'll have to check it. And then the other method is the average method. You calculate the inflation from August, September, October, November, December, January, February, 12 months. You add it together. That one is the average. After adding it together, you divide by 12 for 12 months. And then you get to see the inflation rate. Okay. And then there are two types of inflation. You have what is called the demand pull inflation. This one, they like it a lot. The demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation. The demand pull inflation is the inflation that is caused by too much demand for goods and services. Okay, I'm a tutor, I'm a private tutor, I'm charging for my services. When every day there is 10 people who needs my services, another 10, another 20, another 30 every day, can you see that my prices will increase? Because there's too much demand for my services. Some of the people, I need to chase them with the prices. I'm just giving you an example. That one is called a demand pull inflation. It's also referred to as too much money chasing too little goods in the economy. So this one is caused by too much money in circulation in the economy. And then this one, how can you then address it? You will address it by reducing the amount of money in circulation in the economy. Usually it's addressed by the Reserve Bank. How? By increasing the repo rates or the interest rates. When they increase interest rates, it becomes expensive to go and borrow money from the banks and bring it into circulation. And then another thing, the Reserve Bank can decrease that one by selling the bonds on behalf of the government, the treasury bills. It's just a paper. A treasury bill is just a paper. It says Vusi Ndlovu has bought bonds for 90 rand. After 3 months, we are going to give him 100 rand. So you're holding a paper, you give them 90 rand. After 3 months, what they are trying to do, they are giving you a paper, they're taking money out of circulation. It's one of the measures to address inflation, especially the demand pull inflation. After 3 months, they give you 100 rand. They have addressed the situation a little bit. There are many measures, but these ones are some of them that I'm just showing you. Another measure, if it's not through the monetary policy, it's through the fiscal policy. The government can increase taxes so that they reduce the amount of money, or the disposable income, the amount of money that people can use. So they're taking money from people by increasing taxes. The main aim is to reduce amount of money in circulation. That in that case, you are dealing with the demand pull inflation. Now, the cost push inflation is the inflation that is caused by increase in the prices of inputs in the production process. We have a beautiful example. Right now, we have a cost push inflation caused by the increase in oil prices and increase in electricity prices. These are costs in the production process. And as they are increasing, they cause, after production, these people to add more markup or more profit in their products. Because it's been expensive to produce, they have to sell at a higher price, so it's a cost push inflation. So to address it, you have to deal with the costs. You need to deal with the wages. Maybe wages are too much because there are also inputs in the production process. You need to deal with all sorts of inputs. And then if there's anything I left under inflation, we will see. Now, the balance of payments. The balance of payments. The balance of payments stability. We want the balance of payments. This is a country. This is a border gate between South Africa and Namibia. You have SA, Namibia. I'm using these two countries because most of my people here belong to these two countries. So you have exports to Namibia. In return, you are receiving income. And then Namibians also have exports to South Africa. In return, they are receiving income. So basically, what is happening? We need to have a balance there. We don't want to export too much more than we import. And we don't want to import too much more than we export. But South Africa as a country, we are struggling with that balance. We have too much imports than exports. So we are taking money out of our country. We are buying outside. We are buying from China and stuff. We are taking money out of our country. So there's too much imports. So we want a balance. It's called the BOP balance. Balance of payments. BOP. So we're trying to encourage industries to produce so that we can export. There are programs. Exporting industries or companies, government is trying to meet them halfway so that they are able to export, so that we bring money into our country, take goods out of our country, bring money into our country. So we want that balance. It's called the BOP. We want that stability. It's an objective. It's a goal of the country. Okay? Because now we are living in a global village. No country can exist on its own. There are things that we don't have. We don't have oil, so we need to import it. And then they don't have gold, they don't have diamonds, they don't have platinum, we have it, we export it. They bring money to us. So this BOP, there's an accounting document. There's an accounting document that records all the value of goods and services that were exported and all the value of goods and services that were imported. Okay? So this accounting document is got a current account and a financial account. So this one records goods and services, and then you have their total. Imports versus exports. And then the financial accounts records the inflow and outflow of capital. What is inflow and outflow of capital? It's inflow and outflow of big monies, loans that are intended for investments, not for goods and services. You have Elon Musk saying, you know what, I want to open a big project in South Africa. He's bringing $1 billion. So those ones come under the financial account. So both of them. And then we also have maybe one of our Mutsipe is going to Namibia and say, you know what, I want to invest in a mine in Namibia. He's taking $1 billion to Namibia. So those ones fall here. And then they have their total. So you can have an imbalance here or here. But then totally at the end you need these ones being added together. You want a correct balance here. You want a correct balance here. The equilibrium. It's called the BOP equilibrium. So when we have exported more than we have imported, you have exports bigger than zero. Then you have a surplus. You have a BOP surplus. Okay? But when your imports, sometimes they represent imports with an M, sometimes with a Z. I'm just going to say or Z. When we have imports also being bigger than zero, then we have a BOP deficit. This is a very unfavorable position, the deficit. So this one is a better position. We have exported more money has come to us. This one is a better position, but it doesn't mean that one is a good one. It can be a bad one depending on a particular situation. As you're going to also do Eco 20B in the future, some of you are already doing it, you will also notice that this objective also clashes with the unemployment objective. But I'm going to explain it under Eco 20B, not at this level. So you can have a BOP surplus or a BOP deficit or a BOP equilibrium. Okay? That's when exports are equals to imports. You have a BOP equilibrium. Okay, so our objective is to try to play around the equilibrium. Sometimes we can be in deficit, it's okay. We can be in surplus, it's okay. But we're trying to play very close to the equilibrium. Okay? Now, measuring the inequality. Measuring the inequality. This one is also another emotional one. This one is also another emotional and political one, because you will have a country that is rich. A measurement of inequality, basically, it measures how much the income and the wealth of a country is being distributed among its citizens. Okay? You can have $1 billion. I'm not sure how many zeros it's got. You can have $1 billion in the country, only to find that this billion is only shared by 10 people. The rest of the population shares nothing out of that billion. So it's inequality of wealth and income in a country. Huge parts of income are only taken by 5% of the population. And then the whole 90% of the population is left with nothing. It's the situation we are experiencing in South Africa. It's a big one. All the money is in the hands of Mutsipes and Ramaphosas and their friends and the Guptas. And then you have people stuck up in Alexandra and other squatter camps with no land, no room, no income, no nothing. So this is an emotional one. It's very political as well. So it's an objective. We're trying to redistribute the income and wealth of the country among its citizens, at least equally. It will never be equal, but we're trying to take from the rich and give to the poor. How does the government do that? Taxing the richer more. You know, if you are working, you know that the more you earn, it's called pay as you earn. The more you earn, the more you are taxed. And that tax is then taken and distributed to the poor, maybe through the 350 Rand grants or any other means. That's why even in hospitals, they will ask, where are you working? And then they will say, pay so much if you are working. Even if it's a government hospital, why? They're trying to take a little bit from you because you are working. Those free services are actually meant for the poor. You can afford private services. So it's a means of trying to redistribute income and wealth. Okay? How do we then measure inequality or equality? We measure equality using the Lorenz curve. That's the first one. This one they like. Always pay attention to it. Lorenz curve. And again, these are some free marks again in the assignment. You have the Lorenz curve in the assignment. So what they will give you in the Lorenz curve, they will give you a table. You only use the cumulative percentages. Catch this one. The cumulative, you will see the cumulative ones. You will see the cumulative income, and then you will see the cumulative population. It will start maybe from 10%, 20%, 30%, and then you will have here maybe 5%, 10%, 15%, and so forth. These are cumulatives. What this shows is that 30% of the income in the population is earned by 15% of the population. So what you will do in the Lorenz curve, what you do, you just go and you come here and draw a square like this, and then draw a diagonal line like this, and then this is your 0. And then I think this side is your population. I'm not sure. Double check. Let's say this side is your population. You have your 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. And then this side is your income. Every numbers grow from 0 to that side. If this side is your population, this side is your income, for example. And then you will have your 5%. Let me just write 5. This side you will have your 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. What then happens here is that you will have a situation where, based on the columns and the tables that you will be given as to which one goes with which, if 10% of the population takes 10% of income, so your dot will be here. And then if 20% takes 15%, you will have your dot here. And then if 30% takes 20%, you will have your dot here. But your numbers must reach 100 here and must reach 100 here, by the way. Then this is a line of equality. If the distribution is along this line, then it's equally distributed. If it's not, then you will have a situation like this, and then you'll have A, B, C. And then this is your Lorenz curve, you are done. So I just given you some marks from the assignment. This is the Lorenz curve, you are done. Then this difference between the two lines is the level of equality or inequality. The bigger it is, the more unequal the distribution. The smaller it is, the more equal it is. Okay? And then you have the Gini coefficient. It's also a measure. It's a measure between 0 and 1. Let's say here you have your 50% between 0 and 1. Actually, let me not do it like this. The more the measure is at 0.10, the more equal it is. The more it's at 0.20, it's still a bit equal. The more it jumps 50, it's 0.60, it's moving towards 1. Then it's become more unequal. In South Africa, we are sitting at 0.68. Can you see how unequal it is, the distribution of income? And then they will ask you what is the Gini coefficient, or how do you obtain the Gini coefficient value? You divide this area by the whole triangle here. You divide the area of inequality by the whole triangle under the Lorenz curve. I don't know how to do that, but that's how you do it. That's how you explain it. So, and then you also have a quantile ratio. This one they usually never ask, but you'll just check the notes as well. So the Gini coefficient or the index, it's what I explained, that one. So guys, this is study unit number 1. This is the foundation of the module. Please don't take it lightly and don't take it separately from other study units that you are going to cover. Keep in mind, how does this affect the objectives? Which objective is being affected here, or which objective is being addressed here? You will notice you will start to have fiscal policies and then monetary policies. Those policies are meant to achieve the objectives. And how can the government use its fiscal policy to correct this situation? How can the monetary authorities use this policy to, and so forth and so forth. Throughout the module, this is what you are going to be studying. This is the best foundation you can ever find. Please watch the video. If you have any questions, ask questions. I will respond properly. And then I also would like to hear some comments, even if it's not questions. Thank you so much.